steel fist beneath Alsace. I remember the cold before I remember the fear. It wasn't the kind of cold that stings your skin. It was the kind that lives in your bones, a creeping chill that settles in and decides to stay. Alsace was drowning in snow and silence when it began. Trees stood like frozen sentries, and the sky looked like it had forgotten what color was. We were 5 men in a Sherman, crawling through the white wilderness with a busted heater, 2 working radios, and a job no sane man would have asked for. But war doesn't care if you're sane. I was George MacNeil back then. Still am, I suppose, though most people these days only know the name from that old photograph with the tank behind me and that half smile on my face. The truth is, that smile had nothing to do with courage. It was the kind of grin you wear when you've just come out the other side of hell, and you're not quite sure if you're still on fire. It was December 1944. The Ardennes had already turned into a meat grinder, and while the world watched the Battle of the Bulge, something quieter, darker, was brewing to the south. Alsace had become a graveyard in waiting. Intelligence said the Germans were reinforcing near Herrlichheim, said they were pulling armor from somewhere they shouldn't have been able to. That meant tigers. Real ones. Königstiger, some called them. King tigers. 70 tons of steel and death. Our orders were simple. Move through the Hochwald forest and intercept a column moving west. Cut them off. Delay if we couldn't destroy. A suicide mission written in neat little lines on a piece of paper. We called our tank Lucky 7. Optimistic? Maybe. But you needed optimism in this job. Otherwise you'd start naming your tank things like Coffin with treads. She was an M438, an Easy 8. We called it. Smoother suspension, better gun, still outmatched by those damn cats. But we knew her quirks, every sound she made. And she knew ours. That's how it felt sometimes, like she was one of us. My crew was a strange mix. Reggie, our driver, had a laugh like gravel and a superstition about Red Sox. He wore them under his uniform every mission. Max, the gunner, could thread a needle at 800 yards, but couldn't remember his mother's birthday. Frankie, our loader, was 17, lied about his age to enlist. He still hummed swing tunes under his breath during lulls in the fighting. And then there was Doc, our radio man, a medic-turned-comm specialist with more ghosts in his head than any of us wanted to count. That morning, the woods were too quiet. That should have been our first clue. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of treads and the low murmur of the engine. The snow-swallowed sound made everything feel distant, dreamlike. We moved slow, staying low between the ridges, ducking under the bare, skeletal branches like we were trying not to wake the forest. And then Doc said the words none of us wanted to hear. Signals fuzzy. Interference. Could be jamming. Could be. Or it could mean we weren't alone. We edged down into a small valley, just west of the village of Bischtwiller. The road was narrow, flanked by steep slopes and pine trees draped in white. That's where the first shot came from. Not a warning, not a miss. A direct hit, but not on us. Another Sherman from Charlie Company, just ahead of us. One moment it was moving. The next, it was a smoldering husk, turret ripped clean open like a tin can. We all ducked instinctively, even though that wouldn't do a damn thing in a tank. I felt my heartbeat in my teeth. Tiger, Max muttered. Only a tiger could do that. Smoke grenades went out fast. Frankie dropped them like he was sowing seeds in a frozen garden. We backed into the trees, camouflaged by the snow and chaos. Another shot, this one wide, shattered a tree 20 feet from us. Wood exploded in all directions, a snowfall of splinters. I ordered us to flank left, northeast, toward a ridge where we might get elevation. If we could get above them, maybe, just maybe, we'd have a shot at that belly armor. Reggie cursed under his breath as we climbed. The slope was slick, but Lucky 7 held. The smoke behind us thickened, unnatural. Not just from grenades. Something about it, dark, greasy, reminded me of burning oil and old nightmares. Max was quiet, watching through the scope, waiting. We all were. Then he saw it. There, 2 o'clock, half hidden behind a ridge, waiting for us. Tiger, pale yellow, blotched with white, camouflage for snow, just like us. And it hadn't moved since that first kill. They were baiting us. Smart. Oh, hold, I whispered, though no one could hear me over the engine. Then we fired. The shot hit its side, armor too thick. It turned toward us slowly, like it wasn't in a hurry. Tigers never were. They didn't need to be. Max lined up again. Second shot. This time something sparked. Not a kill, but enough to make it mad. The tiger roared back, its 88mm gun blazing. The ground exploded beneath us. Rocks and snow sprayed up like a geyser. Lucky 7 shuddered but held. Then the trees behind us shifted. Movement. Another one. There were 2 tigers. The ridge we climbed was a trap. I had to decide fast, stay and die like heroes or vanish like ghosts. And ghost we became. Lucky 7 dove backward off the ridge, not so much retreating as falling with purpose. Reggie yanked the controls hard, tread screeching in protest, metal grinding over frozen roots and jagged stones, and for a moment I thought we'd tip backward into oblivion. But the old girl held steady, riding the slope like a wave, and we vanished into the smoke just as the second tiger's shot cut through the air where we'd been seconds before. I didn't breathe until we were swallowed by the woods again, branches scraping across our hull like skeletal fingers clawing to keep us there. The roar of the tigers faded behind us, muffled by the forest and the fire. We hadn't beaten them, hadn't even scratched them properly, but we'd survived. And in that moment, that counted for something. The forest became a maze of shifting shadows and half-buried dangers. Every hollow log looked like a concealed barrel. Every mound of snow could have hidden a mine. We moved slow, methodical, weaving our way east toward an abandoned farmhouse marked on our map, an old supply route that might just give us the cover we needed to circle back. We had to get eyes on those tigers again, had to report their position. Command would want blood for the men we'd lost, but blood didn't mean much if we didn't make it back. Radio silence stretched long and painful, filled only by the rattle of loose bolts and the constant hum of the engine. Doc worked the radio like a gambler rolling dice, murmuring curses to no one in particular. The snow picked up again by the time we reached the clearing. Heavy flakes drifted down in slow spirals, masking the ground, softening everything. The farmhouse stood like a broken spine in the white collapsed roof, one side blackened by fire, chimney cracked like a smile. It didn't look like much, but to us it was salvation, a blind spot in a field of death. We pulled Lucky 7 behind a barn wall, shut the engine down, and for the first time in what felt like hours, let the silence stretch. We took shifts watching the tree line, scanning for movement, anything that didn't belong. Max cleaned a barrel like a priest preparing for a final sermon. Reggie chewed on a frozen ration bar, teeth grinding like gears. Frankie dozed in the loader's seat, one hand still resting on the shells like they were old friends. I sat on the floor beside the radio compartment, running through every decision in my head like a film reel I couldn't pause. There was no guarantee we'd make it through the next hour, let alone the night. The tigers were still out there, and they had the high ground, the armor, the firepower. All we had was one Sherman, half a tank of fuel, and the shared understanding that none of us were getting medals if this went wrong. And yet, something strange stirred in me then. Not hope, not exactly, more like defiance. A quiet flame in the pit of my gut that whispered maybe, just maybe, we could outthink them. Tigers were powerful, but they weren't omnipotent. They had blind spots. They needed space to maneuver. And most importantly, they weren't expecting ghosts. That night, we moved like smoke. No engine. No lights. Just 5 men pushing a 30-ton tank with all the strength and desperation we had left, easing her downhill to a frozen stream that cut through the woods like a silver scar. The water was thin, shallow, barely a trickle beneath the ice, but it gave us cover, noise, movement. We followed it west, deeper into enemy territory, gambling everything on a single idea. If we could flank from the far side, wait for first light, maybe we'd catch the tigers exposed as they repositioned. Maybe. But war doesn't run on maybes. Just before dawn, we reached the outskirts of a shattered hamlet, Oberroder, I think it was called once, before the bombs turned its stone walls to rubble and ash. The place was silent, eerie, like the war had passed through and left the air hollow. We positioned Lucky 7 inside what used to be a grain mill, walls thick enough to mask our outline. Through the cracks in the stone, Max set up overwatch with a periscope. I climbed up next to him, scanning the white hills in the distance. And there, through the pre-dawn haze, we saw it. One tiger, idle, exposed. It sat at the edge of the tree lean, turned toward the valley, turret facing away from us. There was no movement around it. No infantry. No support. Just steel and snow and silence. This doesn't feel right, Max muttered, but I was already calculating angles in my head. We had one clean shot, maybe two, before it realized what was happening. If we could hit the rear armor, maybe detonate its fuel, we'd turn it into a furnace. But we'd have to be perfect. I gave the order. Frankie loaded the HVAP shell, whispering to it like it was a holy relic. Reggie started the engine low, just enough to get us in position. The barn doors creaked open with a groan that cut through the silence like a scream, and I swear time slowed in that moment. The Tiger didn't move. Max fired. The shell hit dead center in the rear plate, just above the exhaust vents. A flash of orange, a shudder, then silence. No explosion, no fire. It hadn't gone up. Then the turret began to turn. I could see it through the scope, slow, deliberate, like it was waking from a dream. Max was already reloading, hands moving with frantic precision. The second shell went in. He aimed again. Another shot. This one sparked off the side. Then we saw it, movement behind the Tiger. Not soldiers. Not tanks. Another Tiger. This one was real. The first had been a decoy. Trap. We'd fallen right into it. As the second Tiger advanced, the first one, damaged but far from dead, swung its turret toward us. I screamed for smoke. Frankie hurled the grenades without thinking. The barn filled with white fog, thick as river mist, and we reversed hard, crashing through the wall behind us. The explosion came a moment later, a blast that threw Max against the side hatch, cracked his helmet open like an egg. We were burning. Not the tank, Max. And outside, the Tigers were closing in. We were outnumbered, outgunned, half-blind, and down a man. And it was only just beginning. The smoke hung in the air like an omen, thick and choking, but wasn't enough to hide us from the Tigers. It didn't matter how much we tried to vanish into the fog, how quickly we reversed into the shadows of the ruined barn. The enemy had already seen us. They could feel us, like a beast hunting the wounded. The first Tiger was still limping, its turret twisting on its axis, but was far from finished. The second Tiger, the one we hadn't seen coming, was moving closer, and in that moment, I knew there was no way out. We had one man down, and the tank was still running, barely. The engine sputtered, stuttered, and the air was thick with the smell of burning oil, like the stench of a dying animal. Max was still groaning in the corner, his face bloodied, his head slumped against the wall, but he wasn't dead. Not yet. That's what I kept telling myself. Not yet. I could hear Frankie, his voice tight with panic, calling out for Doc, but Doc was already busy with Max, trying to keep him breathing. Frankie, terrified and still a kid in so many ways, kept looking out the gunner's sight, his hands trembling over the controls, unable to do anything but wait. Reggie was the one who brought us back into focus. "We don't die here," he muttered under his breath, like a mantra. His hands were firm on the controls, pushing us back further into the wreckage of the barn. There was no way we could outrun those Tigers. No way we could hope to fight them in a fair match. So we didn't. We couldn't afford to fight them at all, not head-on. We were 5 against 2, 5 against the cold, relentless weight of their steel, and every second we spent out in the open was a second closer to our end. I gave the order to reverse. We had to find a place to disappear again, tied long enough to heal ourselves, to think. The barn had been our shelter, but it had turned into a cage, and the walls were closing in on us fast. Reggie pushed the tank backward with a growl of metal, pushing the tracks through the snow and debris, but it felt like we were fighting against more than just terrain. We were fighting against the feeling that the Tigers were closing in, that the forest itself had become a trap. We had been good, better than good, at staying hidden in the past. But this time, the world had changed. The air was different, the silence broken by the roar of the Tigers' engines, the squeal of their treads as they moved ever closer. I could feel the pressure building in my chest, that familiar tightening, the instinct that tells you something is coming, that you're about to be crushed under the weight of it all. And then we saw it, movement on the ridge. Not one Tiger, 2. The first had circled around, staying just out of sight for long enough to make us think we had a chance to fight back. But it was playing a game we didn't understand, one that only it knew the rules to. The second Tiger wasn't the same one we'd seen before. This one had the engine running at full throttle, its massive bulk moving through the snow with an unsettling grace, like predators stalking its prey. Doc turned toward me, his hands stained with blood from Max, his face a mask of determination. "We can't wait much longer," he said, his voice hard, sharp with the kind of cold that comes only when you know you're running out of time. "We need to move, or we're dead." I nodded. He was right. There was no time left. We couldn't wait for a miracle. We couldn't wait for anything anymore. The engine sputtered again, and I braced myself. I thought of the men we'd already lost, of the moments when we thought we had it under control, when we thought we had a plan. The road ahead of us was nothing but uncertainty, nothing but cold and snow and the roar of the tigers as they closed in. Then Reggie turned the wheel hard, yanking the Sherman off the path, heading toward the tree line. We weren't heading anywhere with a plan anymore. We were just running, trying to survive, trying to live for one more minute, one more hour. As we moved, I looked out through the periscope, watching the distant silhouette of the first tiger, its turret swinging toward us, a slow, deliberate turn that felt like the beginning of the end. We were no longer in control. We weren't the hunters anymore. We were the hunted. And that was the moment I realized something I hadn't let myself think about before. We were out of options. We were in too deep. There was no escape from this. Not from the tigers. Not from the war. The snow fell harder now, as if the sky itself was trying to bury us, to erase us from history. The world was a blur of white and gray, broken only by the flash of gunfire as the second tiger opened up on us. The rounds hit the ground around us, spraying dirt and ice into the air, but they missed their mark, at least for now. We kept moving, our tracks grinding through the snow, the engine coughing and spluttering as we tried to outrun death itself. I wasn't sure how much time passed. Minutes? Hours? It all felt like one long, painful second. The world outside our tank had become nothing more than noise and fire and a relentless crush of fear. But I knew we couldn't keep this up forever. We had to make a choice. "We need to turn," I said, my voice hoarse, barely a whisper over the roar of the engine. Now, Reggie didn't hesitate. He slammed the wheel left, steering us toward a narrow ravine where the trees were thick and the snow wasn't so deep. It was a chance, nothing more than a slim, desperate chance, but it was all we had. We were trapped. We were dying, but we weren't dead yet. We barreled through the trees, pushing Lucky 7 as hard as she could go, knowing that the tigers would be right behind us, knowing that every second we wasted would bring them closer. And then, just as I thought it was over, just as I thought we were done for, we heard it. A roar. Not from the tigers, but from the sky. The ground shook. Snow splintered off the trees. A distant explosion shattered the air. And then came the sound of engines. Not just one, not just two, a dozen. The unmistakable hum of Allied planes. They were here. They were coming. We weren't alone, but we weren't saved yet. The roar of the engines was like a thunderstorm on the horizon, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was hearing the last sound I would ever make. My heart was hammering against my chest, and I could feel the sweat rolling down my back despite the freezing air. The trees were flying by us as we tore through the woods, the roar of Lucky 7's engine merging with the distant hum of planes above, a symphony of steel and power. We weren't dead yet. That was all I could think. Not dead yet, but how long could we keep it up? I barely had time to think before the sound of the engines got louder, closer. A series of explosions rumbled in the distance, shaking the earth beneath us like the hand of God himself had slapped it. And then, just as I turned to look at the crew, the first of the Allied planes swooped down from the sky like a great bird of prey, its silhouette a blur against the thick, swirling snow. The fighter screamed past us, its machine guns spitting fire, the sound so deafening I could feel it in my bones, like I was inside a storm. The Tigers, for a brief moment, lost their focus. They were used to facing tanks, infantry, artillery, but they had never faced something like this. The sky had come alive, and with it, a force we had only dreamed of. The fighters sliced through the air, strafing the ground around the Tigers with an intensity that rattled my teeth. A few seconds of madness, just enough time to break their concentration, just enough time for us to slip away. I knew it wouldn't last. Tigers weren't afraid of much, and it wouldn't take them long to regroup. But we had something they didn't, a chance. "Keep moving," I shouted, my voice raw as I clutched the radio controls. my hands trembling from both the cold and the adrenaline coursing through me. Reggie didn't need to be told twice. He punched the throttle harder, pushing Lucky 7 deeper into the forest, following the contours of the land, looking for a place where we could disappear again. We were gambling everything now, not just our lives but our sanity. We had to outrun them. We had to make it out of this alive. Max was awake now, still dazed, but his instincts were sharp. He was already working the gun sight, watching through the scope, waiting for the next threat to appear. Frankie was beside him, reloading, hands moving with precision despite the panic that still clung to him like a second skin. And Doc was back in the radio compartment, his hands fumbling at the dials, trying to get any kind of signal from command. There was no hope of real reinforcements, not now, not with the Tigers so close, but maybe there was some small miracle we could hold on to. The sky above us was full of it. The roar of the planes continued, but now the Tigers were regrouping, pulling back into the cover of the trees. We couldn't outrun them forever. We couldn't keep hiding. We had to finish this. I looked at my crew, saw the exhaustion etched into their faces, the fear hidden behind their determination. There was nothing else left to do. We had to fight, and we had to win. We're not running anymore, I said, voice steady now, as if I had found something in me that I thought I'd lost. We take them on, here, now. There was no hesitation from my crew. They didn't question me. They didn't argue. They had seen too much, been through too much, to care about anything else now. They just nodded, and in that brief, quiet moment, we knew. We all knew what had to be done. Reggie steered Lucky 7 back toward the ridge, keeping low, moving fast. We were going to get another chance. The first Tiger was already starting to reposition, its massive body shifting through the trees, its turret swiveling slowly, calculating. We were almost there, close enough to make a move, close enough for the first shot to count. But then something shifted in the trees. The second Tiger. It had circled behind us, outflanked us in the chaos, and now it was moving in, its cannon pointed directly at our position. There was no more room for maneuvering, no more chance to hide. We were cornered. I saw the flash of the first shot before I heard it. The explosion rattled the tank, throwing us all forward in our seats as the world around us erupted in noise and fire. Lucky 7 shuddered under the impact, but she held. We were still in the game, but just barely. Fire! I screamed, adrenaline fueling my words. Max fired. The shell hit the side of the first Tiger, sending a spray of sparks into the air, but it didn't go down. The Tiger roared back, its cannon booming, the earth shaking under the force of the shot. The ground outside the tank was suddenly full of fire and smoke, a violent storm of sound and destruction, and all I could do was brace myself and pray that we had enough left to finish it. We fired again. This time the shell hit the turret, and this time it stuck. I watched as the Tiger's turret jerked, then stopped, a black smoke trailing from the damaged barrel. But it wasn't done yet. No, the first Tiger was still moving, its engine sputtering, its crew desperately trying to fix the damage. The second Tiger wasn't waiting. It was coming at us now, full speed, its cannon aimed straight at us, and I could see it in my mind, how this was going to end, how we were going to be turned into a smoking ruin before we ever got the chance to make our last stand. Then, in that split second, something changed. The planes returned. I hadn't heard them, not at first, but I heard them now, loud, powerful, a wave of sound that crashed over us like thunder. The Tigers didn't see them coming. They didn't hear them until it was too late. The planes dived low, their cannons roaring in unison, tearing into the second Tiger with a hail of bullets and rockets. The first Tiger, still trying to get its bearings, swung its turret to fire, but was already too late. The second Tiger exploded in a burst of fire, its massive frame shattered by the sheer force of the attack. The first Tiger tried to retreat, but was already dying, its engine sputtering, its gunner too panicked to make an accurate shot. Lucky 7 moved in, just one more shot, and it was done. Our shell hit the rear of the Tiger, the fuel tank ignited, and the beast exploded, a massive fireball lighting up the dark forest as the tank crumpled in on itself, the remains of its crew lost to the flames. It was over. We had done it. We had survived. The Tigers, the steel giants that had hunted us, were no more. They were just wrecks now, burning in the snow, their engines silent. But the victory didn't feel like one. Not in the way I thought it would. The snow around us was thick with smoke. the air heavy with the scent of burning oil and death. We were alive, but the price had been steep. Max was injured, Doc still had blood on his hands, Frankie was trembling, and Reggie, the one who had kept us moving, kept us alive, was staring out at the wreckage, his face unreadable. We had fought and won, but in war, there is no true victory. There are only moments of survival, flashes of life between the endless darkness. And I knew, as I looked at the fire burning in the distance, that our story wasn't over. Not yet. But whatever came next, we would face it together. We were still breathing. We were still standing. And for now, that was enough.